You may be an undigested bit of beef, blot of mustard, crumb of cheese, fragment of underdone potato. There's more of gravy than a grave about you, whatever you are. God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen is often associated with the 19th century short story written by the English author Charles Dickens about a miserly old man named Ebenezer Scrooge, who had been visited one Christmas Eve as he began to unwind at home by the spirit of his former partner Jacob Marley, who had entreated upon him to repent before the dawn of the following morning, and had called upon him for assistance, the aid of 3 ghostly apparitions, representing the cheerful memories of Ebenezer's Christmases past, his woeful belligerence and maltreatment of his nephew, Bob Cratchit, in his Christmases present, and had imparted upon him the ominous perils he might await in the future if he still not repent in the Christmases in his future. But Ebenezer Scrooge had become a hardened and stubborn old man whose heart could not be touched by the loving nephew who had labored in his office, who had refused to believe even the return of his former partner, who had informed him about the heavy chains he would bear eternally for his misgivings, and had steadfastly resisted as mere folly and illusion as the spirits of Christmas visited upon him to the passing of the night transitioning to a Christmas morning, when finally he recognizes the error of his former conduct and treatment of others, waking with a jubilant spirit and soul-full transformation, so contrasting to his former self that those who had known him before were entirely convinced that Ebenezer Scrooge had finally lost his senses while focusing his life only upon English pounds and pence. And most would agree that it was not the loving offerings of his nephew, nor the concerns expressed by his former partner and warnings of punishment, nor the reminder of his past joys and his Christmases past that had transformed him, nor even the fate of death, as much as the recognition that at some point in his future, not only might he finally leave his life behind, but travel to another existence in the fires of an ignominious and eternal hell, a moral and religious consequence that had been put far, far away from his consciousness and his mind. The Christmas Carol is a phrase that was actually used as the original title for the story of Scrooge. The Christmas Carol, God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, actually dates back to the 15th century when songs of merriment were actually forbidden by the British Crown, much like merriment today in pandemic has been forbidden at Christmas. And so in order to celebrate Christmas without offending the monarchs and the royal family, around this time of year they developed the tradition of walking around in groups and singing these rather somber and doleful Christmas carols. And this was a particular favorite for those engaged, intriguingly, in the profession of law enforcement, watching for burglars in the night, or the night watchman, which you can discover by just paying close attention to the first verse, which was the greeting they often offered to passers-by. God rest ye merry gentlemen. Yet like an evolving science and pandemic, the language of merry old England has evolved over time, transforming the meanings of those few words as heard in the present age from a very different expression that had called upon a God in heaven to make you mighty and strong, and not an entity to rest or fall asleep and dream pleasant dreams like children with visions of sugar plums dancing in their heads, giddy about the arrival of a jolly old Saint Nick, bringing wonderful gifts and presents just for them on the following morning, perhaps even graced with the magic of a Christmas snow. Seasonal greetings, my name is Major Mike Webb, and this holiday season, we pick up from the spirit of pandemic Christmas past, where we had also told the story of a man named Ebenezer Scrooge. who had learned the valuable lesson that one might never be too old, or it might never be too late to make a change in your behavior. But there is always still a point of no return. And in a Christmas spirit present, reflecting back on a Christmas past, while there can be a change in behavior, there is also the consequences of such a delay, or as economists might describe as opportunity costs. Have you made the decision before and enjoyed the consequent pleasures of making the right choice on an earlier date? I had enjoyed a unique advantage at the beginning of the public health crisis, having had the privilege to have served as the most junior and commissioned officer to have ever served as the operations officer for all U.S. Army strategic counterintelligence in the continental United States. And in that capacity, I had the opportunity to play a key staff role in the formation of the Armed Forces Medical Intelligence Center, or AFMIC, the precursor to the National Medical Intelligence Center, or NMIC, that ABC News had reported in April 2020 that was supposed to have alerted the former president about an emerging public health threat to military forces in the Sino-Pacific as late as November 2019. Warnings that it was reported by even George Stephanopoulos that the former president had not heeded, resulting in consequences. And possessed with this advanced prior knowledge, since the beginning of the introduction of COVID-19 to the United States, I have been in communication with various federal, state, and even international agencies to attempt to correct serious errors and begin our first litigation against the government response on April 2nd, 2020, the first and longest surviving litigation against the government response to the public health crisis, which is now on petition for certiorari before the United States Supreme Court. The following briefing is unclassified and all information is completely available in the open source environment and was available readily to you as you look for it. Seasonal greetings, traditionally, at least in the United States, at this usually festive time of year, many would in a former time greet one another with the greeting of Merry Christmas, which has certain religious overtones about which many more increasingly have taken offense. But I was raised in a Christian family with traditional values, and at Christmas time we said Merry Christmas during this holiday season. And generally it is well understood that no offense or slight was intended in former times. However, according to the World Health Organization, the International Health Organization, that on March 10th, 2020, had issued a pandemic declaration during this time when we might begin joyfully singing about the first 12 days of Christmas and about that which my true love might give to me, globally as of 4:48 p.m. Central Eastern Time, 10 December 2021, there have been 267,865,289 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the world, a number that is the equivalent of 80% of the entire United States population. And a novel coronavirus has been attributed to a total of 5,285,888 deaths worldwide, just a little under 1 million shy of the number of Jewish people killed in the Holocaust, a number that includes 793,937 Americans, according to the COVID data tracker that is maintained by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. As of their last update, but which just 6 hours ago, Sunday, December 12th, according to Reuters News Reporting Service, exceeded 800,000 today. Exceeded 800,000 Americans. This climb by 100 fatalities took only 73 days, while the last similar jump had required 111 days, all associated with the Delta variant, not the Omicron variant, which is yet to exhibit any lethal capability at all, despite the general alarm reported in the press. However, what is significant is that an uptick in fatalities in veterans care facilities from around 800 per month to 1,000 per month, a 25% increase in mortality outcomes in facilities closed to visitation since the World Health Organization declared the pandemic on March 10, 2020. And no reason has been articulated by any public health agency regarding what appears to present an increase in efficiency of COVID-19 and lethality, especially amongst veterans, because this uptick was occurring while many were observing Veterans Day, and not even one word was said in Arlington Cemetery in front of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier about this tragedy to those who have served this nation. Simply stated, mistakes were made, whether through gross negligence or through acts of malice. And in the second Christmas of a pandemic, traditionally a time of celebration, festivities calling for peace on earth and goodwill to all mankind, it is extremely difficult, as even families are being advised to avoid coming together, and with over 5 million fatalities worldwide, to close our eyes like little children and simply pray that one day, by some magical miracle, the pandemic will simply, of itself, go away. Particularly in light of the fact that since June, when 85% of the elderly who are in nursing homes over the age of 65, who had been the highest representation of fatalities, continues to be 73% of the fatalities of COVID-19, and it is not as reported because they are unvaccinated. We are no longer children, and as adults we have a responsibility to each other and to our children, who will miss yet another Christmas this year, like the last, as we wait for Godot or whatever magic time will bring to end the pandemic. And quite frankly, since all of this information that I am reporting is readily available in official government science reports, not YouTube videos, not made up opinions, all available on the internet. After a year, even panicked in fear, it was incumbent as a duty, even more so than just going out to vote, for any responsible and reasonable adult to begin doing their homework, to learn the science long before 2 Christmases had passed, and not just follow orders. The coal in your stockings on Christmas morning this year is there because you have not been good adults acting responsibly, but rather acted like bad children, forgetting about your priorities as adults. Choices in a natural selection that, at least a report, have been beneficial in reward to a mindless genome, a single strand of RNA, with most fortuitous luck that has apparently, or at least a report, befuddled not just you, but even the best minds in medicine and science, if you want to continue to believe that. This was, as many believe, a natural selection that has resulted in the fatalities of 14,895 persons residing in Virginia, 83% of whom are the elderly, over the age of 65, ranking 15th in the nation among all of the 50 states for elderly fatalities, and under the leadership of the nation's only physician serving as a state governor. And it may be fairly said that if you were wholly compliant with the government response, simply taking orders, not researching this information and waiting for it to pop up on your news feed, it is an admission that you had no better suggestions, no initiative to find better suggestions to address this tragedy that may have improved that outcome, and admission of your own inadequacies to address this global problem and sorrowful outcome. While sitting at home under orders, did you as an adult ever engage in rigorous study and reading of science reports just to simply obtain a better understanding of your altered circumstances that close your businesses, close your churches, close your libraries, close your schools, affected the lives irreparably of your children? or even to enable you to provide assistance in improving those outcomes in an effective way, not just an efficacious one. Most probably did not. And over 2 years ago, even the assistant director of the World Health Organization openly and publicly lamented, like a Jacob Marley, that nobody appeared to have even read his extensive and very informative report, from which not very much has changed with regard to what we know about a novel coronavirus. Information that was available 2 years ago that most probably never read. In researching candidates for the Arlington Public School Board responsible for the awesome task of reopening public schools safely for your children, did you just take the advice that if we have a vaccine, everything would be all right? Even knowing during the course of the election that infections were still occurring, even amongst vaccinated individuals in what became a new term for you, breakthrough infections. You may have, in that due diligence effort, discovered litigations regarding the public health crisis response. And there were a total of 7 that we brought, with one that has been accepted for petition for certiorari at the United States Supreme Court. We have B. Northam, the first filed and longest surviving litigation brought against the lockdown orders. And if you are not aware of that, then you were not doing your homework, because you can find it on the internet, even though it has never been mentioned in the press for whatever reason. Just last week, a second petition for certiorari was filed with the nation's highest court, a matter brought in challenge to the facial coverings that the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health had determined over a decade ago would be wholly ineffective in a respiratory tract public health crisis. A report that you could have found had you looked on the internet. And had you performed your due diligence, then you too would know this. And if you knew this, you should have taken action. As well as the fact that no credible study has even to date overruled that determination from over a decade ago regarding the non-medical grade facial covering to which you have, as an adult, freely granted your consent to be mandated to wear. Because if you didn't bring a case, that is exactly what you did. And had you performed your due diligence as an adult, you would be informed that we had filed also a challenge against the vaccines. The very first litigation challenge brought in the Commonwealth of Virginia, brought after the celebration of the Independence Day weekend. The very first litigation challenge brought in the Commonwealth of Virginia against the vaccines, and that action now is on appeal to the Fourth Circuit, which has provided an opportunity to apply for a prejudgment injunction to compel the White House to respond to a FOIA request, a simple yes or no question regarding clinical metrics of risk, specifically the infectious dose and secondary attack rate for COVID-19, and whether that information is considered classified, which they could only be, as you would know had you done your homework, if the causative agent for the disease that has been responsible for the deaths of so many in Virginia, the infections of 149,339 children celebrating or could be celebrating Christmas in Virginia this year, 972 hospitalizations of children in Virginia, and 11 deaths of children in Virginia who will miss this pandemic Christmas, is the property of the United States government, and hence would have, of necessity, not been zoonotically evolved, as many have said in the press, even by government leaders, but rather cultivated in a laboratory. And if you did not know any of this, if this is brand new news to you, this Christmas missed by 11 children this year is your own. So have yourself a merry little Christmas now. My name is Major Mike Webb, and by God, I am running for Congress. Next year, make the right choice and follow me and we shall make America great again. Honest. And y'all come back now. Yeah. Bah, humbug. Mr. Eichmann, you put up quite the fight. I was very impressed, and it was so nice of you to give the names of your many Nazi friends in Argentina. But you must understand international politics. We have a special deal going today. We are only prosecuting those who have killed 6 million Jews in prosecutorial discretion. If you happen to know someone else who killed 6 million Jews, we might be interested and might be able to arrange a deal. However, for now, we're preparing a nice send-off for you. And Mr. Eichmann, you will never forget. You may be an undigested bit of beef, blot of mustard, crumb of cheese, fragment of underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you. Whatever you are. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.
Thunk, I could have had a vaccine.